as you've probably seen on television.
We just lost him. No, we just lost him. No.
All right, let's try that again. As you guys are well aware, so thank you for being here today. I'm taking this moment of personal privilege to recognize the work of the security team at Toro Infirmary. And I wanted to do this before the actual meeting started, because I'm sure as you have followed, gentlemen, you know today's going to be a very busy, packed day. So I want to take this moment on behalf of the city of New Orleans and this New Orleans City Council to recognize you for your uncommon valor and bravery in regards to an incident that happened on December 20th of last year. On December 20th of last year, security personnel at Toro, led by Eddie Calmanero and Frank Graff, were made aware of over a dozen gunshots outside of the hospital, fired by two men shooting at each other with semi-automatic weapons. This was an instance where many people would have run away from the incident, but security personnel under this duo's leadership ran towards danger. And in doing so, they immediately secured one of the gunmen and wrestled away his semi-automatic weapon. Their quick thinking, their bravery, their heroism led to addressing an immediate situation when NOPD was not present. And furthermore, their efforts led by securing that individual so quickly led to the quick apprehension of the other gunman and the gun he tried to kind of clumsily throw away in a catch basin. It's very seldom in the city when we have the crime problems that we face that we have people who are in a position to help others put themselves in harm's way that do so. I have two commendations. I'm not going to read them just because I have a lot of whereases in them, but what I've previously stated encompasses what's in them. And it's really a small token of our gratitude for the work you've done, and not just protecting the individuals on the sidewalks or the individuals who are in harm's way, but largely the community as a whole, because Toro is really the center of the uptown community, and it is absolutely where babies come from. All three of mine have come from there. And the idea of gunmen firing off weapons out in front of a hospital where literally newborn children are being held is terrifying. I know that Councilman Harris wants to make some comments, as it is in her district, but we'll get these proclamations to you as soon as possible. They're done. They're here. I have them. But as you know, because of COVID, we're not allowed to do those sort of things right now. But I want to thank you again for your heroism. I want to thank you for your bravery. And I really wish you the best. And if there's anything this council or this city can do further to assist you in your efforts in protecting those of us who cannot protect themselves, we are ready and willing to help. So I will now yield to Councilmember Harris.
Thank you, Councilmember Morell. Officers, I just want to give a heartfelt thanks to you and your bravery. You exemplify how it takes a community to fight violent crime. And so I sincerely appreciate you. I live not far from Toro, and I have friends who live right next door. And your bravery at that time of need is exemplary. So you deserve all of the accolades that you can get right now. Thank you for your service.
Thank you. Thank you.
Does anyone else want to comment before we move into it? All right, there you go.
If you can hear me okay, I would certainly like to commend the officers again for their bravery. And I guess I'm saying the same thing that was just said, and I think that we can't say it enough. I have great respect for those who are in law enforcement, especially in our city right now at a very difficult time. The very thought about going toward the sound of semi-automatic gunfire is just incredible in itself. We don't hear enough of those good stories. We don't see enough of them on the national news or on the local news. And I just want to take time out to commend you all for doing something that a lot of people, especially even the critics of the police department and the security officers, would never do. And that is run toward danger, run toward helping other people. So thank you all very much for your work in that particular instance. And I think that it probably reflects on the things that you all do in general. That act of bravery is probably been accompanied by other things that you all have done along the same lines. And thank you for your bravery and your service.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We appreciate that.
Thank you.
As a former foundation board member from my youngest son being born at Truro to what you guys do with geriatrics and everyday care, it's what Truro has always done. For those who understand the history and the foundation of that hospital, it's embedded in the community, not just about wellness and overall general medical care, but any and everything that from security to the janitor to the administrative staff, they've always been involved in that area and in this community. So you guys have continued that legacy. Your help, what you have done is not only heroic, but it's also part of the Truro brand. So thank you. Continue doing what you do, and we appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
I want to also echo the sentiments of my colleagues. Officers, thank you for your bravery. Running to gunfire, opposed running from it is to be commended. So thank you for your quick actions and keeping our community safe. Thank you.
All right, gentlemen, I think that is it. I will make sure that we get the proclamations to you as soon as possible. Once again, thank you so much for all your hard work. Thank you so much for everything that you've done. And like I said, if we can be of service to you like you have been of service to the community, please let us know. Thank you, guys.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, thank you, members. Now we're gonna make sure everything is set for the 10 o'clock meeting and get this thing rolling, hopefully shortly after that.
Hey, Paul, just let me know whenever you're ready to start.
Will do, thank you. All right, Madam Clerk, if you're ready, I believe we're ready.
Roll call. Councilmember Thomas. Councilmember
Present.
Councilmember Morel.
Here.
Councilmember Moreno.
Present.
Councilmember Harris.
Here.
Councilmember King.
Here.
Councilmember Jeruso.
Here.
Councilmember Thomas. I had saw him earlier.
Councilmember Thomas is on. I think.
I'm muting. My face is here.
Okay, we have 7 members. We have a quorum.
All right, thank you so much, Madam Clerk. We are doing this full council meeting virtually, as you can tell. And so we are going to, in just a bit, we're going to read the full agenda, and then we're also going to break for public comment. But I do want to mention that I will be taking the first order of business before doing that. And that first order of business is the presentation by the police chief. So, Madam Clerk, if you would, read the first order of business, and then I will make some opening remarks and then turn it over to the other council members if they'd like to make opening remarks. And then we will begin with the police chief and his team. So, Madam Clerk.
The first order of business is a presentation. Superintendent Sean D. Ferguson, New Orleans Police Department, and the New Orleans Police Department senior leadership discussing the ongoing issues around crime in the city of New Orleans.
Thank you so much, Madam Clerk. As you just mentioned, the first order of business is bringing up our New Orleans police chief. And this will begin what will be a series of discussions with the criminal justice stakeholders to address violence in our city. We owe the people of this city a serious, constructive, and expansive dialogue to examine the system's most glaring shortfalls and intervene with urgency, because it is necessary to save lives. We must put politics aside, and we have to stop this finger pointing and collaborate to find solutions and strategies to make our city safer. We have to face it that our city is suffering and our city is scared. And at this point, we are not seeing reassurances that things are going to be okay or that things are going to get better. And that is really disappointing to say, but unfortunately, it seems true. So that's why we are here. That is why we have to be here. The council must use its platform to drive dialogue and collaboration from all stakeholders about what is broken in our system and then ensure solutions and strategies are implemented. This is not going to be just a bunch of talk. We, the council, will push for action from stakeholders and move forward on our own action items as well. The murder rate has reached the highest it's been since 2004. Just this past Tuesday, another mother was murdered while driving on the interstate, 34-year-old Whitney Watts. She had her daughter in the car who witnessed it all happen. Councilmember Thomas was actually at the scene. Children are losing their lives. Most recently, 7-year-old Dylan Burton on the day after Christmas, and 12-year-old Derek Cash on January 5th. 218 people were murdered in 2021, and we've had about 1 murder per day so far this year. Their loved ones, mothers, fathers, grandparents, children, and friends, they're never going to be the same because of the pain and trauma that is now left with them. As I mentioned, we're going to begin today with a presentation from our police chief. But policing is not the full answer. There are many cogs to the criminal justice wheel. We will bring in numerous other stakeholders in our criminal justice system next week, including the judges, our DA, representatives from the mayor's office, the sheriff's office, reentry groups, victims, advocacy folks, and many others. Because bottom line, we all have to work together. We have to use every tool in our toolbox to find both long-term solutions and alternatives to violence, and to hold those accountable who prey on the most vulnerable in our community. Let's be clear, we are here out of love and compassion for the people of this city to have the first of many candid conversations on how we can work together to make all neighborhoods safe and bring hope and opportunity to the people of this city. I'll turn it over to any other council members who'd like to make any comments.
It might be best, since we're all going to make comments, if you just go down the line.
Councilmember Morel, you were breaking up, but go ahead. I'm going to take you next.
Yeah, I was just making a suggestion, Madam Chair. I think since everyone's probably going to make a comment, we should probably just go down the line. That
ahead.
way everyone will know when they're supposed to go. Just a suggestion, Madam Chairwoman.
Perfect. Go ahead, Council Vice President Morrell, and then we'll start with A and go to E.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I think that many of us knew that this moment of accounting, the beginning of this accounting was coming. I think that I speak for many of the new council members when I say, I think the reason why you see so many new faces on this New Orleans City Council is because the people of the city of New Orleans are really done with talk. They're done with extensive meetings. They're done with these fireside conversations. They want action. I think that it's important to admit something that people are not saying. And I think what people in the city of New Orleans feel and what they know is that crime is out of control in the city of New Orleans. Part of what's disheartening to the people of the city is that the leaders in the city, the leaders of all aspects of the criminal justice system, will not admit out loud individually that crime is out of control in the city. And that's the first step of solving the problem, is admitting that we have a problem. And the problem is crime as a whole, especially certain aspects we'll dig into later in this meeting. To be clear, every plank, every aspect of the criminal justice system is busted. There's not one single group, whether it's the New Orleans Police Department, whether it's the DA, whether it's the judges, each single group has a sphere of responsibility in regards to pursuing and addressing crime. And there are shortcomings for each. And so I want people to know as they watch this video, this stream, this council meeting today, that as we have this dialogue with Chief Ferguson, we will be having a very similar dialogue with every other criminal justice partner, because it's not just one part that is not coming up short. They're all coming up short. And this is the beginning of a conversation of how we can work together in each respective sphere, addressing what is not being done correctly and encouraging groups to work together towards a solution. Now, I want to say something out loud as a parent that I think people need to hear. What's really troubling to me as a parent in the city of New Orleans, who's obviously terrified for his children every day, is when you talk about the two kids that Council President Moreno just referenced, when you talk about Dylan, you talk about Derek, there's a part of that conversation that you also have to add as another thing to consider. These were two kids who died within 10 days of each other, who went to the same school. Now think about that for a second. You have two families that are struggling with loss, but the emotional and psychological devastation of an entire school where two kids who were in school with them before Christmas break didn't come back because they were no longer here. That is what's happening across the city right now. Parents are having to explain to their kids why they can't walk to school anymore. Parents are having to explain to their kids why they can't go outside and play anymore. The devastating effect this is having on families cannot be understated. It's really important as we get into the issues today that we begin with a sense of candor. I'm going to apologize in advance because I am sure that at times the candor that I will express and the other council members will express in this conversation will probably not be received in the spirit of which it's being sent. But I speak for myself and many of my colleagues in that the time for pleasantries is past. We should all be candid with each other in these conversations starting today and next week. And we should all be 100% with working together, but admitting where the failings and shortcomings are so that we can work together to solve them. I think that the city of New Orleans has not seen a strong council in a very long time. And I think a lot of people who are watching this video today, many who moved here less than a decade ago, don't remember what a strong council looks like. What I commit to you today is in these next two meetings, you're going to see what a strong council looks like. Thank you, Madam President.
Councilmember Jeruso.
Thank you, Madam President. Good morning, Chiefs. Look, I am not going to belabor the points that the president and the vice president make. I think we all know why we're here today. But I do want to highlight questions that I'm going to have and make sure that we get answers to those today. We're all here because the number one thing that government does is provide public safety for people. And it's NOPD providing safety, it's safety permits providing safety, it's streets providing safety. And so I want to know what we are doing given the budget that NOPD has about recruiting and retention. And Chief, I know there's been issues with the state, with the fact that we're to encourage early retirement. And on the other hand, we have proposals by people like Councilmember Morel to try and recruit people from other places and make sure that they don't lose their rank if they're coming over. At the same time, one of the things I've always been concerned about is, do we need more detectives in certain parts of the units as well? Do we need more people in homicide? Do we need more people in domestic violence? Are there intangibles? Councilmember Harris has mentioned this to me before. And Leslie, I don't want to steal any of your thunder by any stretch, but where are we on certain things that make people want to stay and be a police officer here in the city of New Orleans? Are promotions going the way that they should do? Do they have take-home vehicles the way that other municipalities do it? Are there other incentives that either are provided, have been provided, should be provided in order to help police do their jobs here in the city of New Orleans? So that's number one for me. Number two, within this framework that things need to get better is, what are we working on together? And I realize you all can't make everybody sit down necessarily, but we have to get there. And Chief, you had your press conference yesterday and talked about lack of finger pointing and getting down to business. And I think that's how the citizens all feel, is that they don't want to hear whose fault it is. They just want it fixed. And that's what we want too. So what are we doing to do two things? Number one, convening all the necessary stakeholders at the table. And I think it's an important step that the council president has called, and I'm glad the chiefs are here today. But what do we need to do to make sure you, the DA, the school board, religious, business leaders, the judges, everybody who is an essential part of this system are in a room and working together and identifying the gaps that Councilmember Morel talked about, and then working to fix all of those together is important. I'll also say number three for me is, I feel we've gotten into an either or place in our society. Either you're for police or you're against police. You're for everybody being in jail. Nobody should be in jail. And the truth is, we live in a complicated world, and it's and. We need to be in an and place. What do we need to do to make sure we are supporting the police and making sure we're helping other parts of the system? And to that end, within NOPD, what can we be doing as a city to help you all? I know that we're working on mental health issues. How can we help with the intervention so we take some of the load off of NOPD? Is there something, Chief, we can do now with the deputization powers to take some of the load off of NOPD? Is there other people who can write tickets at accident scenes so your officers aren't spending countless hours taking care of remedial work as opposed to addressing the most serious issues in the city? And then finally, and I haven't heard this, but I'm going to start saying it, we need more focus on victims. Where is the victim focus in what is happening right now? I spent time over the last couple of days talking to the grandmothers of people who are carjacked in my district, and all I heard from them is, I'm concerned for my babies, I'm concerned for my children. And as Councilmember Morel and Moreno articulated, that goes the same for our children who died in Algiers, who died in New Orleans East, who were hit by a falling bullet as well. What are we doing to provide the necessary resources for victims too? How do we make sure that as NOPD is making an arrest, that the information that they can provide helps NOPD, it helps the DA, and it helps the judges? And I think as we are looking at this, we know that you are one cog in the wheel, but my hope is that we know where we are, we strengthen all of those, and so the wheel starts spinning correctly rather than being grinding. So I think I want to make sure that as we go through today, that we hear articulated ways that we can all be working together and making sure that at each step of the way, we see where the problems are. And lastly, I'll just say, I think we need to have something that publicly shows what's happening too. And I know, Chief, you've said many times before, and I've heard from the captains when I'm at meetings, and I've heard from beat cops that NOPD feels like they're arresting, and then something happens and the people you've arrested are back on the street in very short order. Okay, how do we document that? How do we show what NOPD has done? How do we show what the clearance rate is? How do we show what happens when somebody goes to a bond appearance? How do we show whether or not cases are being screened the right way? How do we make sure that, particularly in domestic violence cases and serious carjacking and murder cases, that people aren't being released on bonds, they're being screened the right way? How do we make sure the judges are doing their part, because they're an important part of this too? So I want to see something where we can look to the public and say, no more is this an anecdotal, we have a problem at all parts of it. Here is the information that we can show you about what we are collectively doing as a group. And I thank you all for being here today, and I look forward to hearing some of the answers about how we all get to the place where we want to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Giarrusso. Councilmember Harris.
Thank you, Madam President. Superintendent Ferguson, I want to thank you and your team for appearing here today. I want to say to you that having been to several neighborhood associations meetings and listening to the volume of calls and the volume of emails that I've gotten in the past 10 days since being sworn into office, the major concern is crime, and that's no surprise. But I want you to know that people are scared. They are scared to get gas. They're scared to go outside. They're scared to go to the grocery store. And we cannot continue to live like this. But I also want you to know that those same people support you and our NOPD officers. They have literally asked, what can we do for our officers? And I've said to them, first and foremost, say thank you. Thank you when you see an NOPD officer and other emergency workers. And so I say to you today, you and your team, thank you. I also thank the DA and our criminal court judges for everything they do to try to keep our community safe. But I also know that sometimes when we are in the thick of trying to get the work done, there is sometimes no time to think ahead or think about what could be. That's why I plan to call on my fellow council members to assemble a violent crime advisory committee, a team of local criminal justice scholars and experts, reentry experts, social workers, mental health experts, and others, people who are data-driven, who can independently look at the data, assess the situation, look to the success of other cities, and independently advise this council on what can be done. What will get us out of this current surge of violent crime quickly, and what data-driven initiatives can we create, implement, and fund to stem the tide of violent crime in the future? I plan to present that motion at the next regular council meeting with parameters on the makeup of the Violent Crime Advisory Committee, their goals, and actionable, fundable, realistic items. This Violent Crime Advisory Committee in no way is meant to undermine you, our DA, our criminal court judges, or any people who work in the criminal justice system. But instead, it is for us to help you, to help our community to stay safe. Councilmember Giarrusso talked about incentives, and Superintendent Ferguson, you and I talked about those. I want to partner with you to try to find incentives for our NOPD officers and emergency workers, including low or no cost higher education for them, potential tax abatement on their homeowners' taxes, and other incentives that can really help with recruitment and retention and make NOPD and our other emergency services attractive to people across the country who want to work in the criminal justice system in New Orleans. I look forward to the dialogue today, and I look forward to the dialogue on Monday as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember King.
Thank you, Madam President. And thank you, officers, Chief Ferguson, for coming today and being present to hear what we have to say, and not just hear what we have to say, but hear what our constituents have to say. I want to start off by saying we're not here to point the finger. It's not time for name calling and blame against saying who was right and who was wrong. Our community as a whole feel like we are in an environment of lawlessness. We have people committing crimes at any time of day, any location, and people are afraid, like Councilmember Harris said, to just go get gas. Our elderly are afraid to sit on the porch and talk to one another. Our children are afraid to play in the park, to walk to school. And when you're afraid, you can't live in a city. You can't live your life afraid. So we're here today and these next few meetings to come up with solutions, not just solutions on how you all can be better or how this group can be better, but how can we as a council be better, and how can we as a city be better. I think working together is the only way that we're going to get out of this this situation that we're in. As a former defense attorney, public defender, and a private attorney, I realized that the criminal justice system works better when everyone works together, from the arrest to the prosecution to the sentencing being, or to the punishment being given out by the judge. When everyone's on the same page, that's when this system works together the best. I don't want to leave out the residents of our city. They are a huge part of this criminal justice system as well. When you see something, say something. If you know someone is doing a crime, let the police know. We all have to work together. And I want to know from the police, what can we as a council do to help you? I think I can speak for everybody without any hesitation saying that we want to do whatever we can do within our power to help the police department work better, whether that's more funding, whether that's getting the message out. What can we do to help you all do your job? It's a tough job, especially in this environment. And we want to do whatever we can to help out. And our colleague, Mr. Thomas, Oliver Thomas, OT, said it Monday at the MLK Wreathland. It's not time for feelings. Change happens when people get uncomfortable and when people are forced to be uncomfortable. So we're going to say and do some things that are going to make people uncomfortable. That's the only way to get real change. That's the only way to move forward. So my biggest thing, or one of my biggest things, are going to be accountability. That is from the schools, from the parents, from the council, from the mayor, from the district attorney, from the police officers, to the judges. Everyone has to hold themselves, others accountable. And we may say things that's going to step on some toes or hurt some feelings, but I'd rather step on toes and hurt feelings than bury a child, than visit someone in the hospital. So we have to get out of this political correctness, if we want to get this done. And that's just the truth about that. And I want to end by saying this. It saddens me as a resident, a lifelong resident of New Orleans, of Algiers, of the West Bank. And it saddens me as an elected official, a leader, when I can't go to the barbershop, when I can't go to the gym, to the grocery store, to my kids' school, without being asked, why is this parish so much safer? Why is this parish so much better? Or this city? And I don't believe that at all. But perception sometimes can be reality. And I want the reality to be that this is a safe city. This is a safe parish. So let's work together to make that a reality. Let's work together to ensure that everyone is held accountable. And let's work together to make sure the city is safer. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember King. Councilmember Green.
Thank you, fellow council members, and thank you, our president of council, for setting this important presentation today, and also for having us in a posture where we can talk to a variety of agencies on Monday about the serious issue of crime in our city. It is the top priority amongst citizens of the city of New Orleans that they feel safer in our city, because so many do not feel safe. And they have a variety of reasons and a lot of justifiable reasons to not feel that way. I mean, when you see carjackings taking place and shootings taking place on the interstate at an unprecedented level, increases in armed robberies and the like, you have reason to feel that our city is not safe. I've got to tell you, I don't have notes, but I do want to relate something to you. Two things. One is that 45 years ago, for Martin Luther King Day, I made a speech at my high school where I talked about the seriousness of crime in our city of New Orleans. I talked about the issue of guns and interestingly enough, the ready availability of them. This is not something new, but 45 years ago, I talked about that, and I talked about murder in our city. 45 years later, over 10,000 people have been murdered in the city of New Orleans. Think about that and put that in perspective. Go by Tad Bromley Stadium and look at that stadium. Imagine it full for a football game, and then the next day, all 10,000 plus of those people are gone. And the number is higher than 10,000. I'm rounding it off. That's just a tragedy. That's abnormal, and it's just not acceptable. And some of the things that we're seeing today have been things that have been going on in our city for a very, very long period of time. I am so glad that council, with the support of our city, recognizes that we need to do something about violent crime in our city. And I know that the approach is not a simple one, because there are multiple agencies that deal with the issue of crime. The biggest problem that we have with crime is the starting in the homes of those whose children and others are continuing to participate in crime and criminal activities. But we have to get started somewhere. I'm so glad that this council, with the support of the citizens of New Orleans, sees it as an important issue. During this campaign, I was carjacked. Maybe the most frightening thing about the fact that I was carjacked was that after I removed all of the belongings, well, I'll tell you the story real fast. It's only gonna take a second, because I want to thank the police department for the incidents that I've been involved with when there have been a call. There's been a call for police. I was carjacked. Fortunately, the police vehicle that witnessed actually the incident after I waved to them and told them that I had been carjacked couldn't pursue because of the non-pursuit policy. So came back and was taking a report from me on the incident. During the taking of the report, the officer told me to get in the car immediately, that my vehicle that had been stolen was involved with an accident. And it was involved with an accident at the corner of Milton and Paris Avenue. The most important thing is that I got great support from the police at that time, and the issue was resolved. Unfortunately, a youth whose eyes I was able to look into, a young person, was willing to use a gun to take a Ford F-150, and then, even with no one in pursuit, crashed into another person and injured that person. The police report is available. I think most people are familiar with it. But maybe the most frightening thing about it at all was that later on that night, after I'd gotten my belongings together that I had transferred from my total vehicle to my wife's vehicle, I took out all the glass and all the things like that, and just got back to work on a campaign. It had become that, very honestly, normal in our city for me to understand that some people get carjacked. I was not traumatized as I should have been, to be very honest with you, about such an incident. I use that as an example to say that we can't get to the point where we have determined that these sorts of carjacking rates and the like are normal. They are abnormal, and we need to address the issue right now. Just as Martin Luther King said and was quoted, I had a chance to quote on Monday at the rally, sometimes it is too late. That means that the time to get something done is now, and we need to address this issue right now. So I'm looking forward to Chief Ferguson's presentations, to our presentations by our district attorney and all those involved with our criminal justice system. The number one issue and concern of our council has got to be to address the rate of crime in our city. I know it's multifaceted. I know it has to do with sometimes poverty, with what goes on in the home, with what goes on in the mental health, what goes on with regards to our courts and the like. But none of that is an excuse for us not providing the maximum level of safety for our citizens so that they can feel comfortable in our city. And I look forward to working with the chief and to those who will make presentations on Monday, and especially to this council that has shown its motivation to address what the citizens have asked us to address, and that's the high rate of violent crime in our city. So I look forward to today's presentation and to working with the council, and thank you, members of the council, for your support and work.
Thank you, Councilmember Green. Councilmember Thomas.
Madam President, I'm not going to be long. So much has been said, but to you, our Vice President, Morrell, all of the other colleagues, thank you guys for representing the best in this legislative body, to our chief and his men and women who give their lives every day. Unity of purpose and cooperation. To me, Madam President, the things you and I have talked about. How do we have that unity of purpose? How do we have a level of cooperation where egos and titles really don't matter? But we've been the murder capital in this community in 5 or 6 different eras. This roller coaster for crime is not new. And let me say this, I have no doubt that we will suppress crime. That at some point, because of the strong council, because of the mayor, because of the cries of the public, because of the business community, because of the challenges to our bread and butter, our tourism industry, we'll get together and do what's necessary to bring crime back, crime down. Why? Because we did it before, did it in the 60s. People in this town, when they talk about the good old days, Councilmember Giroux, even in the good old days in the city, crime was 6 times higher than other cities our size. That wasn't acceptable. Of course, during those 17 of 16 years of 300 and 400 murders, when rappers and people were bragging about murder capital, where we led the nation in some of the most violent crime, we were familiar with that. Council President, when you said fix the broken criminal justice system, to deal with crime, that's where we have to start. But Councilmember King, I'm going to kind of close on your thread, fix our broken families, fix our broken neighborhoods, fix our broken schools, our broken wages, our broken and discriminate economics. Too often we've fixed one component, and council members will do it again. But will we fix those other broken parts of the system? So when we say the number one issue is crime, no, yes, no, yes. The number one issue is injustice anywhere that it happens in our community. And then lastly, I'll say, let's be remembered these names: Enoch Thomas, Mikey Stewart, Breonna Allen, Jameer Alfred, Dylan Burton, Derek Cash, etc. The definition of insanity is continue to do the same thing with the same approach and expect a different result. So my question is, while we're being tough on crime, and we will we love our people? Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Councilmember Thomas. Chief, you and your team will be up. Paul, if you can please help the chief with his presentation. And Chief, thank you so much for being with us today and bringing your team. Appreciate all of you being here. And thank you so much, Chief, of course, for your dedicated service and work. We know you have a very difficult job. And so we appreciate you taking the time to talk about this very important matter. Oh, and council members, let me just say this, just to keep order. Let's have the chief go ahead and go through his entire presentation first. And then once he's finished, we'll go through and have questions. I just don't want to, have people popping in and out because it may get confusing just because we're on this virtual meeting. So Chief, whenever you're ready, you can begin and introduce your team, and we will go through your presentation and then do questions when you're complete.
Thank you. Good morning, Madam President, as well as our City Council. Good morning, everyone. I am Superintendent of the New Orleans Police Department, Sean Ferguson. I have with me our executive staff of the New Orleans Police Department, starting with our Chief Deputy Superintendent of Field Operations, Chief Chris Goodley, Deputy Superintendent of our Investigative Service Bureau, Chief Paul Noel, Deputy Superintendent of Management Service Bureau, Chief Lawrence Dupree, Deputy Superintendent of our Professional Standards and Accountability Bureau, Chief Otha Sandifer, and last but certainly not least, our Deputy Superintendent of our Public Integrity Bureau, Chief Linda Westbrook. So again, thank you all for giving us this opportunity just to speak to the state of the New Orleans Police Department. What can we do collectively to make our city safer? I would like to begin first and foremost by introducing myself to our new council members and let them know a little bit about who I am. I am Sean Ferguson. I have been a 23-year veteran of the New Orleans Police Department. I am a resident of this city. I'm a concerned father of this city. I'm a member of our community day in and day out. Born and raised in the Lower Ninth Ward, moved to Algiers by grade school and have been in Algiers and the West Bank of New Orleans ever since. Prior to becoming the superintendent of the New Orleans Police Department, I was the commanding officer over our education and training division, which is our police academy. Before that, I was the commanding officer of the 2nd District, which is uptown, as well as the 4th District, which covers the West Bank of Algiers of New Orleans. I'm a proud graduate of Southern University of New Orleans, where I obtained my bachelor's degree as well as my master's degree in criminal justice. I am also a member of our Major City Chief of Police Association. I have extensive training and leadership training sponsored by Southern Police Institute, as well as our Senior Management Institute for Police Executive, SMIP, which is sponsored by Police Executive Research Forum. If we can move on to the next slides, I would like to give a state of the New Orleans Police Department. This is our agenda, state of the department. Give you an update on crime data that we are seeing and have this conversation with regards to how the council can help us make our city safe. And I'll take any questions. And this is a very brief presentation, but we want to make sure that I was able to give you some information as to where we are as a department. Next slide would be the state of the New Orleans Police Department. Next, please. So we are currently staffed at 1,058 commissioned personnel. Last year was definitely a challenge with regards to recruitment and retention. And again, I would say, and please pardon me when I say this is not just a disclaimer, this is the truth. This is the reality of our profession. What you're seeing here in the New Orleans Police Department, what you're seeing in the city of New Orleans is not unique to New Orleans. And there's no excuse, and I am not saying this as an excuse, but I just would like to give some context to what we're seeing is not anything that is unique, different from what we're seeing across the country. Just over 200 non-commissioned personnel. And I will say that we've looked at every component of our department to identify if there are opportunities to put more officers on the street as opposed to having them in administrative roles. There are some administrative roles that absolutely require a commissioned personnel, but we have exhausted every means necessary to ensure that we are putting our best foot forward and putting commissioned officers on the streets of the city of New Orleans. Prior to 2020, with our recruitment efforts, we were receiving 400 to 500 applications per month. Now we're averaging about 250 per month. In an effort to retain and recruit what we're trying to do and build up our New Orleans Police Department, Honorable Mayor LaToya Cantrell has committed over $1 million to updating our recruitment campaign. That is in cooperation and in partnership with New Orleans Police and Justice Foundation. Last year, we graduated 2 recruit classes when many agencies across the country, and going back to 2020, we graduated 3, when many agencies across the country had stopped recruiting due to COVID, due to the social climate at that time and the outcry for defunding the police. We were able to continue to hire despite those challenges seen everywhere else. And as right now, we'll continue to work with an outside consulting firm to identify areas in which we can be a better department. What can we do to retain our officers that we do have, and what can we do differently to recruit more? And again, COVID has created its challenges, but nevertheless, we have not wavered. Going to the next slide, we're speaking to the commitment, our commitment to the future of the New Orleans Police Department. Next slide, please. Our commitment to the New Orleans Police Department. So what we have done when we speak to retention, we gave a captain's test with the New Orleans Police Department. The first time that has done since before Hurricane Katrina, since 2004. We've implemented a new promotional process where you're not just taking a test and say, hey, I graded well on the test, I should be of that rank. You also implemented a process that takes into accountability, takes in consideration for that individual's job history, their individual's performance evaluation, their individual's disciplinary history. This is something that was demanded from the public when we went through these reform demands just a couple of years ago after George Floyd's murder. We've also identified funding in which we'll be promoting over 100 officers to the position of senior police officer. That had not been done since 2018. We broke ground last year, latter part of last year, on our firing range, our very own firing range, as well as a 4th District station, a new 4th District station that will be built with and in partnership with our fire department in Algiers. But our firing range, I think, brings some credibility, brings a sense of morale boost to our officers, because now they do not have to travel to other agencies to get their qualifications in, to practice some of their training, in which we demand of them on a daily basis. And last, we're building a state-of-the-art crime lab, which is right here next door to our department, our headquarters right now. So, and in that, we hope to build out a DNA portion of that, which would definitely help us be a better public servant to our community. And we continue, as we know, we are under a consent decree. And I've heard Council Member Green express some concern with possibly, some issues with not necessarily just a consent decree, but pursuit issues. I will say to this, we have a restrictive pursuit policy, but we do not have a non-pursuit policy. It is very much dependent on the crime. And I definitely would like to have a conversation with you more about your particular experience to get a better understanding of that. But nevertheless, we're down to five last categories when we speak to the consent decree. I will say community engagement. I heard an echo across someone saying something. But community engagement, as well as performance evaluations, we have received compliance in, and we were expecting to have a public hearing in that very soon. The other 3 categories are bias-free policing, stop, search, and arrest, and supervision, all of which we are working diligently with our federal monitors and the Department of Justice. I will say, we are not, as we have conducted our audits, as the Department of Justice has conducted their audits, as well as our monitors. None of these categories have identified any trends of unconstitutional policing whatsoever. This is about quantifying the appropriate measures to determine how to determine bias, because what we all do know and have to admit is that we all have biases. So we have to realize and figure out a way as to how will we measure that. And that is something that we all agree upon, all 3 components, from the police department to the monitors to the Department of Justice. Next slide, please. Going into our crime data, you can go on to the next slide, just speaking to crime in itself. COVID, and I've said this and I will continue to say that, I've been saying this over the last year. COVID has created some unprecedented challenges for us as a criminal justice system, for us as a police department. Policing has somewhat changed. I mean, even prior, and not just COVID itself, the social climate has forced some change, forced us to change the way in which we police in some ways. But COVID has added an additional challenge when we were talking about keeping our public safe, and as well as our officers. So we may have been less engaged at some point in time as to not to spread. We did shift to a culture of more summons than physical arrest. And we can, even as we move to a sense of normalcy, we even continue some of the issues of some of the policies in which we are issuing summons, as opposed to actually making physical arrests, because we recognize that gave us an opportunity to learn that, hey, we do not have to make a physical arrest. We can issue summons on many of these cases and still hopefully expect some sort of level of accountability. But through it all, we have continued to be that one consistent component in the criminal justice system. We were not able to work remotely. We were not able to shut down. When our citizens call for assistance or call for help, we were there to respond, and we have to respond. And we did see an increase at the beginning of 2021 in violent crime. May of 2021 we're as high as a 37% increase in violent crime. Many expected a serious spike during the summer months that were approaching. We implemented a plan called Operation Golden Eagle, in which we were able to partner up with our federal and state partners for those 3 months. And every month, in a month-to-month comparison for the months of June, July, and August, we had an increase, but going into September, we also had a decrease in homicides month-to-month comparison. And what I would say about that is at the end of the year, riding that same trend and continuing to do what we had been doing, even after the operation was over, we remained engaged. We resulted in a 7% increase in violent crime, which was a dramatic decrease by 30% over the last 9 months, the last 7 months of the year 2021. Yes, we had 218 murders in the year of 2021, but we had a 53% solve rate for those. And we also saw 17 cold cases. That was more in 1 year than we had in the 3 prior years collectively. So we remain engaged. We remain committed to the safety of our city. We had that 8% decrease in armed robbery, while we also saw a spike in the latter part of December, in which carjackings went up, and we had a 1% increase in carjackings in the year 2021. Now we're moving over to the next slide, please. Moving over into 2022, that significant spike has carried over unfortunately, into 2022, but we have not wavered. A 38% solve rate in carjackings, 42% solve rate in armed robberies. We have made arrests, and we have seen in many instances in which we've arrested individuals, some of the same individuals. And it is an unfortunate reality. This is not pointing fingers at anyone, but what we are seeing is that in many instances when some of these individuals are committing crimes and being arrested and then released for whatever reason, they either become they reoffend, or they become a victim of a violent crime themselves, or even, again, the perpetrator of a violent crime in itself. So what we're seeing ourselves be placed into a situation of what I think one council member said, it appears to be lawlessness. I think the environment in which we have created as a result of these unexpected and unprecedented challenges is an environment of a bolder, more brazen criminal, because they do not fear any consequences to their actions. I think another council member asked something about what makes us so uniquely different from other jurisdictions. I think that level of accountability is what makes us a little bit different than other of our surrounding parishes. But nevertheless, again, 16 homicides this year, 10 homicides cleared so far this year. We have a 63% solve rate. So our officers are working diligently. Our detectives are working diligently. Yes, we are short-staffed. We appreciate more resources. We would definitely welcome more officers. We're doing our hardest that we can to recruit additional officers while also retaining what we have. Next slide. And so to have this conversation with you, the council, next slide, I will begin by saying my ask of you would be to provide that much needed public support for our officers. Yes, we're here today to speak to what can the department do differently, or if not necessarily differently, how can we be more efficient? Because we know and we have seen and we have proven what we have been doing works, but we can do more. And I mean, we collectively, we as a department, we as a council, we as a city, but our officers need your support. And I mean public support. Since the murder of George Floyd, this profession has not received the support that it deserves publicly. Behind closed doors, there's so much support. Everyone wants to commend our officers. There was a time when the council brought officers to the council chambers and commended them for their work. But what we've seen over the last couple of years is elected officials separating themselves because they do not know what their constituents' feelings would be if they partnered with or supported a law enforcement agency. And I'm only speaking from the reality or the view in which, or the perspective in which our commissioned officers have been seeing and challenges that they have been facing. We have to do something to slow that rate of attrition. I've heard many different reasons why there are officers, our attrition is as high as it is. I would say this. One reason is absolutely the profession is different and people are walking away from this profession and not subjecting themselves to the level of accountability that we hold ourselves to. And not just in the New Orleans Police Department, but the community, the citizens of New Orleans hold our profession to. Two, yes, there are those who wish or think that they're going to greener pastures, but we have seen in many instances when those that have left, some have returned because it was not as green as they thought it would be. A third thing I would say is legislation has played its part with regards to why some of our officers have left, that the retirement rate was much higher than what we had seen in recent years. But through it all, that support would allow us to be a more honorable profession, because we have not lost honor within ourselves, but I believe our community, I believe some of our elected officials have lost their faith in the honor of this profession, and we're just asking for that support. Next, I would ask that you review and consider modifying the use of surveillance and intelligence gathering technology. That has hindered some of our efforts in our ability to locate, identify, and arrest violent offenders. Some of the tools have been taken out of the toolbox, and we've been somewhat handcuffed. And we need that to work. And we're willing to work with you to make sure that it is a tool that is not abused. We have been working with our Department of Justice as well as our monitors to get these tools finalized, these policies finalized, to ensure that these tools are not being abused and they're using in a way that is beneficial and effective to us as a department, but to us as a city, to make sure that our city is safer. And last, I would say, do what we're talking about doing right now, hold every aspect of the criminal justice system accountable. And not just the criminal justice system, there are other components of our city that has to be held accountable. And going to parenting, going to some of the social injustices, meaning economic inequalities, meaning educational inequalities. I think all of that has to be addressed in order for us to move forward. Unfortunately, we, from a law enforcement or criminal justice aspect, we're dealing with some of the pitfalls of other issues. But again, no excuse. We have to stay the course and we have to figure out what is the best path moving forward. So in closing, I want to thank you for giving us this opportunity to come before you. We are committed to the practices and reforms that we have put in place for over the last 10 years. This is our DNA. We're not doing anything because of the consent decree. We're doing what we are doing because this is what the citizens of New Orleans expect of us. This is what is expected of a constitutional reform-led police agency across the country. And I would say that to say that even during our trying times of protest, many agencies came to us and are still coming to us to see what is it that we are doing and have been doing to stay the course. We're committed to the safety of our city. We're looking forward to working with each and every one of you. We're looking forward to working with our criminal justice partners. We do recognize there's much more work to be done, and we're looking to identify actionable results to include even a more proactive approach from the New Orleans Police Department when it comes to addressing violent crime. So I'm saying that to say we are putting together some plans in which we would like to be more proactive in our policing methods. We want to work with everyone in our community. We need to find a way to hold these violent offenders accountable. If it's behind bars or whatever, or ankle monitoring bracelet, whatever that level of accountability may be, but it has to be something that is consistent in which these criminals recognize that they will be held to the fire. So again, we as the New Orleans Police Department stand ready to assist and work with every component of our criminal justice system, every component of our community. But just know that we have not wavered and we will not waver. We'll continue to be engaged in doing our due diligence and the best that we can in ensuring the safety of our citizens. So thank you again, Madam President, and I am open to any questions that you and the council may have, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chief, for your presentation. And let me be the first of the council members to show their support for the dedicated men and women of the New Orleans Police Department and for the fact that they go out every day and risk their lives to keep us safe. Chief, you ended with really where I wanted to begin. And I think what we're waiting to hear and the public's waiting to hear is, you know, what is your plan? What is your plan to deal with this uptick of violence? What are you changing? What are you doing differently? What can the public expect?
So I won't go into details because, of course, safety, for safety purposes, I won't get into specific details as to what that plan is, but I can assure you it is a proactive plan in which we will be more engaged. But again, if we go back to the history in which we've seen over the last year or so, we can be as engaged as we want to be if the arrests are being made and there's no accountability behind that arrest. We still would need that support on that end, but we will be more engaged. I think you probably would start seeing a little bit more visibility, especially using our overtime that we have now. We're being more thoughtful in the use of our overtime as well. Just yesterday, 7th District was in a proactive capacity, was able to take a couple of guns, 3 guns actually, off the street because we're being more intentional as to how we're using our overtime. And so we're changing some deployment strategies in which we were shifting to more of a call for service response. As I said before, with regards to COVID, we changed our style of policing. But now that we're starting to see some normalcy, we're shifting back to some of the things that we saw work in the past, which is that proactive capacity.
Can you go a little bit more into detail about what you're talking about that worked in the past that you're going to be now able to do again?
The proactive capacity, we're going to look at ways in which we can be more proactive citywide, meaning more engaged. I see, and I've called the attention of my staff to some of even the minor things that I've seen. Full windshields tinted, expired temporary brake tags, things that we didn't necessarily enforce before, and basically because of COVID, we realized there's some other challenges with DMV being closed that we couldn't necessarily hold our constituents accountable for those actions. But we know in those types of vehicles, for the most part, they tend to move drugs, they tend to move illegal weapons, they tend to commit illegal crime. And I'm not going to stand before you or sit before you and say that this is for everyone, but definitely we have to, if we address some of the minor violations, it could lead to us getting in front of the major or the most violent violations occurring.
Chief, you were talking about in your slides about the fact that you said you had 1,058 commissioned personnel. Out of those commissioned personnel, how many of them are on the street any given day?
So we would say field operation counts for approximately 65% of our department. I can say this, we have about 6%, which is about 60 officers that are out due to COVID, for one reason or another, be it directly positive or some sort of quarantine capacity. We have as many as 80 officers out due to administrative duties, either injured or military duties, things of that nature. But still, 60% of our department is in field operations. So it varies from day to day. If you take it to account training for our officers, off days for our officers. So I can't give you a specific number, but 60% of our department is accounted for in the field operation. That includes patrol as well as detectives.
So, okay, so look, I don't have my calculator handy here, but if we're talking about 1058 commissioned personnel, you're telling me that's 60%.
600.
So, right, so 600, but then you're also telling me that there's many who are, or however many you said, I think you said 50 are out with COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so then you subtract another 50, so now we got 550, and then you said that some are
But
out.
no, that's not 550 out of field operations. So that COVID number is the entire department. That is not just field operations. That's
do you know how many how many do you have out right now in field operations?
I have to get you that number. I don't know that off the top of my head.
And then also with training too, do you know how many are out in field operations who are in training?
That varies from week to week. I mean, every week we're doing some training, at our academy, which is that recertification. You have your gun, you have your firing range training, you have your driving training.
I think, Chief, it would be helpful to the council and the public to have accurate numbers of how big the field operations are kind of on a daily basis, and to keep track of, who may be out with COVID, who's out in training. So we have a real accurate depiction of who's out on the street. And, just kind of thinking out loud here, Chief, and you were talking about, doing some things differently with overtime and things like that, or different operational things that are different. Is there thinking, since even if we really ramp up recruitment efforts, it's going to take some time to really build up our force. Is there thinking to more efficiently deploy the officers who we have, the commissioned officers, the 1058 who we do have, and start operating this police department as one that's not necessarily scaled to be one that has 15 or 1,600 officers, but one that can more efficiently operate as a department with, let's say, 1,000 officers? I just worry that we're not going to be able to catch up, or any department really across the country, with bringing in a bulk of new officers. So what can be done to better operationally deploy officers throughout the city and build a department based on, let's say, 1,000 officers?
So what we do on a daily basis, we monitor every aspect of this department. We adjust accordingly. We look at our deployments. We look at the needs. We follow the crime trends, and we move our officers as needed. We've also considered some, opportunities. I mean, we've had ideas in the past. We've taken some of our detectives and put them in a patrol capacity one day, maybe a month. I don't think that is a good idea right now, given the level of investigations that we have right now. So the way that we are working right now is that we continue to monitor. We adjust on a daily basis, and that patrol that is supported through or with overtime to beef up our staffing and beef up what we're doing deployment wise. But that is something that we see every day. That is something that we face every day. There's not anything that we're looking to do in the future. Every day we change up our strategies. We bring in support. We have a situational response team that will support a district whenever there are flare-ups. Like this past Saturday, we had that series of carjackings. You had individuals that came into work who were left their families behind. They were off, and they came in and supported and addressed and responded to the need of this city. So we know that it is different now. We're short, there's definitely a shorter staff department, but we also heard from one of the council members asking for additional resources for our detectives. So we have to find that fine balance. And I think what we have been doing has been working, but until we can actually have these individuals know that they will be held accountable, we're going to continue to find ourselves spinning our wheels. And again, this is not about pointing any fingers, because I will say to you, New Orleans is not in this alone. If you look at Houston, the city of Houston, their criminal justice system has been fractured since Hurricane Harvey. That led into the challenges that they're facing in COVID now. So we all are facing challenges, and we continue. I know I personally speak to my colleagues across the country to try to identify what can we do differently? What are you doing differently that is working for you that I could possibly do here? And that is what we do on a daily basis.
And Chief, I appreciate that, but let me get back to the question that I asked about really taking a drastic look at some operational changes and even more than just day by day, but just looking at how the department is really structured and laid out. Any possibility that there could be even consolidation of districts? I mean, in Jefferson Parish, they patrol more land than we do, and they have 4 districts. We have 7, and so 8. And so, how can we, potentially consolidate those? I've even heard conversations from some law enforcement experts about, it could possibly be efficient to consolidate the 2nd and the 6th districts. Those are both uptown districts. The 2nd just got a beautiful new headquarters or new building, what are your thoughts about making some drastic changes like that that could potentially more efficiently patrol the city
I'd like to
and
have
assist
a,
with response times?
I'm
And
sorry, you're
assist
saying
with-
something else?
And yeah, and also potentially assist with response times too.
You know, the way I look at that is if you really, you have not changed the landmass. It is still the same area that's being covered. I think the way that we're designed right now, you have that community has that direct relationship with that one captain of that, you know, and those officers that are in that area on a daily basis through geographical deployment. So, I mean, it's something to be considered, but I cannot say that I necessarily agree with that, because putting everything into one district and now this captain have to more or less be engaged with every community who was very demanding and wanting to have that direct relationship with their commanding officer. I think we start filtering down some of those or watering down some of those relationships.
And don't get me wrong, relationships are incredibly important, no doubt about it. But I think at this point, I think that the people in the city just really want whatever is best to protect them and keep them safe. And you know, if you're looking at having two buildings and officers having to man two different buildings, potentially consolidating could put more people on the street. I'm just, you know, throwing it out there as something, you know, that potentially could be looked at by you, Chief, as you know, we may have to just come to this realistic, you know, realization that we're not going to be a 1,500 or 1,600 police force. How are we going to operate effectively and efficiently then as a 1,000 or maybe even less if we don't build up our recruitment? How are we going to be an efficient department as we are right now with the numbers that we have right now? I think that really needs to be looked at closely, but I don't want to belabor this too much. And I have just a couple more questions before I turn it to the other council members. Paul, can you put up a slide that Jeff Asher created for us? I think it's slide 6 from the presentation that he did for the council. And he actually will do this presentation on Monday, but here's one of the slides. Chief, I want you to take a look at this. So there's been a lot of conversation about the Tiger unit, which from what I understood, dealt with handling armed robberies. And once it was disbanded, and I want you to talk about why it was disbanded, but once it was disbanded, we saw this spike in armed robbery incidents, and we also saw this spike in carjackings as well. And I mean, it's a big, like, boom spike, as you can see in the charts. So I'm just wondering, and Paul, you can take it down. But Chief, can you tell me about why this Tiger unit was disbanded, and you know, your thoughts about potentially bringing it back? I'm just trying to get an understanding of this.
Absolutely. So first, let me go back to your previous question about what we're doing differently. Thank you to council for voting to allowing us to deputize some of our other city agencies. So we're doing something differently, city departments. What we're doing differently, looking for burden reduction opportunities. One is with on-scene services, responding to car crashes so that we can focus more on violent crime. The other is allowing these other city departments to be deputized to address some of the quality of life issues that we've been called off the street to respond and assist with. So those are just a couple of our burden reduction strategies that we're working towards to do things somewhat differently. Now, Tiger, when Tiger was disbanded, again, that goes back into this whole entire task force thing as well. At that time, I felt that it was the appropriate thing to do. We had to think of policing differently. I felt that there's a different direction in which we wanted to go from a more investigatory side. Even with that investigatory side, there was still a violent crime. There was still a response, a proactive response with our situational response team. But as you pointed out, those dates, actually, that was in the middle of COVID, in which we've seen an uptick in several crimes. It wasn't an instant in spike. It was a dramatic. It was consistent. It was more or less dramatically going up. It's more in a slow pace, I would want to say. So Tiger, that was a decision that I made that I felt was in the best interest of the department and to get more patrols. As we're talking about different things that are going on, as to get more officers out in the patrol. And a lot of those detectives that was in Tiger actually are leading detectives in the districts right now that we're speaking of. A VK, Violent Crime Abatement Investigation Team, was an opportunity for us to create a partnership with our federal and state partners and utilizing some of our federal resources, which was what we have been doing. But again, the key to Tiger's success was a fully operational criminal justice system that we don't have right now because we're facing so many challenges with COVID. Again, not giving any excuses, but facing or stating the reality of what was then and what is now.
What's the difference between VK and Tiger?
VK is a smaller unit that works directly in partnership with the FBI as well as state police partners. They are right there, boots on the ground. Tiger was more or less fully NOPD, although they still have some partnerships, some cooperation with with our federal and state partners. This particular VK unit, they're embedded daily together in one shop, in one unit together every day.
So, Chief, you've mentioned technology, and do you have enough folks working at the Real-Time Crime Center to be able to analyze the data that's coming in?
Real-Time Crime Center is not under the purview of the New Orleans Police Department.
Okay, are they assisting you all with any types of crime initiatives?
Absolutely. When we're doing any type of follow-up investigation and we need to locate or identify some evidence to help further our investigation, our detectives relocate to the Real-Time Crime Center to try to see if they can identify something that could support their case.
And I get it that that's through Homeland Security, but so are you using them every day, several times a day? I mean, I'm just trying to figure out, you know, we have cameras everywhere. I'm trying to figure out how often we're using this technology. Every
time there's a case, our detectives are going to the Real-Time Crime Center, and I have not been told that we've had any issues or deficiencies with RTCC with regards to staffing or with regards to supporting our officers in investigating their cases.
Thank you, Chief. You know, I think for me, what I'm looking for is, you know, I really need more information, and I know the public does too, and it might even be beneficial in doing a public dashboard of, you know, letting everyone know just what's happening with the numbers in our police department. What is the reality? What does that really look like as far as like who's out on the street? And then the other thing too, Chief, I get it that, you know, you don't want to lay out some of the intricacies of what you are saying you're planning to do to deal with this spike in violence, but you know, this city, the people of the city really need to see a plan from you, really need to see, you know, something. This council would like to see something from you with different steps that you're taking. And I know we're having this conversation here, but we're lacking specifics. And what we really would like is specifics. And then, you know, finally, I'll just ask this. If you could submit a report to us too on different kind of long-term operational, if you could really do like a deep dive assessment on long-term operational efficiencies for the department, that would be incredibly helpful. You know, take a look at what would happen if you did consolidate some of these districts. You know, could that be beneficial? And then would it be helpful too, Chief, and this has been suggested as well, since there certainly needs to be more collaboration among all the cogs of the criminal justice wheel, for there to be a potential crime czar. I just saw that the city of Memphis put this in place because they were having similar problems, you know, and not talking to each other, and they brought in a crime czar to really analyze all of the different systems and, you know, see where there could be improvements that will lead to collaboration. You know, to have a crime czar that could then report, you know, directly to the council, to work with all the different stakeholders. You know, that may be a possibility. just another thing to put out there to consider as we're looking for specific action items to really improve the whole system as a whole. So Chief, I know I've taken enough time, and I may come back at the end with some additional questions after hearing from my colleagues, but I want to go ahead and start the conversation. Councilmember Thomas, we'll start with you.
If I may, before we move on, because you said a couple of things I just want to address.
Go ahead, Chief. Go ahead.
So Commissioner Stevens, in our efforts in trying to bring that in that spirit of collaboration, we did try to get together, and unfortunately things just did not work out as expected. But there have been many efforts in trying to bring together all aspects.
Explain that to me more, Chief. What do you mean it didn't? That there was an effort and it didn't work out? Explain that to me.
There was a meeting, a monthly meeting amongst the criminal justice system, in which we were all supposed to be meeting to discuss challenges and what can we do to be more efficient. And certain parts of the system elected not to participate after a couple of months. So for one reason or another, I don't know why. I'm not, again, because we're not going to get into this. Anyone's pointing fingers at anyone, but I'm just giving you some context as to there have been some efforts in trying to have that conversation. And I really, really believe what we are doing is working, has been working. And while we are looking for ways to improve, I know that the plans that we have put into place and the deployment strategies that we have put into place have been effective. Now, can we be more efficient or more effective? I always look for those opportunities.
You know what, Chief? I just realized I forgot one question. Sorry, Councilmember Thomas. You had a slide here talking about the overall solve rate for homicides. The slide says we finished 2021 with 218 murders and 53% overall solve rate for homicides. Now, are you saying that you solved more than half of the murders of 2021?
Probably just a little bit less than half, because 17 of those cases came in with the cold case, the 17 cold case cases that were cleared as well.
Okay, so that for those stats, you do add the cold cases from previous years. Okay. The other thing too that I wanted to ask is that on these, when you're talking about solve rate, does this mean arrest?
Arrest, warrant, clear by exception.
But I mean like in custody arrest.
This includes clear by arrest, clear by warrant, or clear by exception. In custody arrest, warrant obtained for someone's arrest, or exception meaning it was cleared through whatever exceptional circumstances that we may have been dealing with that during the course of that investigation.
Okay, I got it. So, but like 53% doesn't necessarily mean that they are behind bars.
No, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Thomas.
First of all, thank you, Council President, and thank you, Chief, and your team for your report. I'll stay right there, and I'm not going to belabor this, but I'll start with Councilmember Marino's ask of your plan. A lot of people are going to have a lot of plans and a lot of ideas, but the only one who can implement a plan are you and the experts in law enforcement who work on the front line. So your plan and what your men and women, what you guys do every day, is at the end of the day, the only plan that's going to matter in terms of public safety with our law enforcement agencies. The national solve rate for homicide, murder, manslaughter, and the other categories is the last 2020 or 2021 report was about 61.4%. What is our solve rate in that area?
So right now, for 2021, our solve rate was 53%. Right now, for 2022, we're at 63%.
Okay. So last year we were below the national average. Right now, in terms of the immediate cases that were solved, we're a couple of percentage points above the national average. But consistently, when you look at the history of the New Orleans Police Department, we have seen solve rates as low as 20, 30, 40%. I know you brought it up a lot, but what can we do differently, especially because we know solve rates actually help deter violent crimes, when criminals know that we have a police department that's doing investigations, that's likely to catch them and apprehend them. What are we doing to increase that so that our national average is more consistent than where we've been in the past?
So part of that comes into play with regards to DNA and trying to build out that DNA, and that my mayor as well as our CEO has committed to just investing into that DNA portion of the crime now. But also I would say what has to be done is a trust in the system, the entire criminal justice system, so that people will come forward with information, but they only will come forward with information if they know that there will be results at the end of their case.
That's a good point, because I was going to segue there next. I was to tell poor God doesn't make any mistakes. When we talk about the criminal justice system, it starts with an incident. You guys respond to an incident. You write a report. You gather evidence. You submit it into the criminal justice system. The DA, whether to prosecute or not, the judges and juries, whether to convict or not. Since we have this issue out there now with cooperation and coordination, which part of that system currently is the weakest component, and one that all of us need to focus on if we're going to get to the solve rate and to the kind of cooperative effort, a system that works to the level where our Superintendent Chief Ferguson wants it to be? What do we need to strengthen immediately?
I don't think it is my position to point out any particular portion of the system. I can tell you what we are doing, and know that we could possibly do some things to improve what we are doing, but I don't think that would be fair of me to point out any particular component of the criminal justice system and say, hey, this is where we need to focus.
So who should?
I think they should, as the various components, should own their deficiencies and come forward with it. Or you as the council call them and have that conversation with them and looking into the entire system and identifying those cogs in the wheel and be able to say, hey, this is where the issues are. But I don't think I, as one component, should point out any other component saying that they have issues or challenges, because I can't speak to their issues or challenges. I can only speak to our issues and our challenges.
So you're not prepared to say there needs to be better prosecution, better conviction, better trials?
I can tell you this. I think we need to figure out a way to hold these individuals accountable. We have to figure out a way to go to court and hold these individuals accountable. I think, again, COVID has presented its challenges for us all. And we have to figure out as a system, how do we navigate this? I know we've had this thing back and forth between the DNI throughout this week. And I've said just yesterday, I'm not going to go out and have this war of words. Right now, it's about action, and it's not about pointing fingers. And while I say this, Councilman, let me correct something, or else my mother's going to kill me, because she jumped on me yesterday. I misspoke as to what she told me. When I said, when you point a finger at someone, you actually have three fingers pointing back at yourself, not a thumb. So I had to write that wrong so that I don't get fussed at by my mother again. So
and just so people know, our academy most recently, especially when you were head of that academy, it's now being recognized as one of the three top 1, 2, or 3 best academies in the country now, correct?
Yes, we are. You know, we work diligently with DC and various other agencies across the country to try to remain as one of the top academies in the country.
And in that academy, we learn how to write reports, gather information, and submit that information within the system so that it's the best possible gathering of information and surveillance and investigation so that it can stand up, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. 1,058 police officers. Is that enough men and women for you to keep the city safe?
I can always use more resources. I can always use more officers. You know, we've seen this over the last 150 we lost last year. So yes, we are facing some serious challenges. I would definitely welcome and want more police officers within the New Orleans Police Department to do our job better.
Yeah. And you and I have had this conversation before. You know, you remember we go back to those old interagency agreements We currently have the state police operating now. You'll remember the days when we expanded our relationship with the levee police, the harbor police. Some minor felonies and traffic stuff was given to the sheriff's office. So is there, and I understand the conversations about the consent decree, but are there any conversations about how we use those law enforcement agents? Because within the boundaries of the city, several thousand people are licensed to do law enforcement at some level or another. Is there any conversation to expand our manpower by reaching out to those agencies in spite of the consent decree, or to amend the consent decree so that we can, especially in this period right now where you're saying we need more men and women, so that we can immediately increase visibility and manpower?
So, I mean, we work with those agencies, meaning the levee board, harbor, whomever, on a daily basis, the sheriff's office, in which they're working well within their jurisdiction, but they expanded by a little bit. Even some of our local universities have assisted. I mean, they participate, or they attend our weekly max meeting at the various districts that they work directly with. So we do maximize those partnerships to the best of our ability, given the circumstances.
BOP, Black Order of Police, Fraternal Order of Police, and PANO, how integral they are in you working with those unions and those organizations as it relates to policing or your police plan? How involved are they?
So I meet with each union at least once a quarter. Of course, COVID had hampered that. We didn't meet as we would normally do, but we just met within the last month or two. I meet with them at least once a quarter to discuss some of their concerns, give them a state of the department, and see if there are opportunities for us to work together. Actually, we're working on right now, Chief Westbrook is working with the unions with regards to educational-based training, disciplinary action, as opposed to, you hear a lot of unions saying that we are over-disciplined and things of that nature. So we're looking at opportunities where we can use an education trained discipline to leverage that training to be more resourceful in educating our officers when there has been more or less a simple mistake.
There used to be a substation in the Lower Ninth Ward when we had more officers and the budget was smaller. Now the police department budget is bigger, but we've eliminated that substation. How and why did that happen? And is there the possibility of getting that back?
So some of the challenges we have with when you talk about a substation, we have to look at a technical infrastructure that would be attached to that as well. Meaning, we had that cyber attack a few years ago, and so we're more security conscious when it comes to that. So to try to overcome just having a substation, more or less, like Captain Nolan has done, is she strategically or intentionally places officers in the Lower Ninth Ward that have to remain there throughout the entire tour of duty, so that we do have that presence across the canal or any other areas that may be in a more vulnerable situation like the Lower Ninth Ward, where they're stuck between St. Bernard Parish and Industrial Canal and potentially bridges going up. So we just try to be more intentional in our deployment or placement of our officers.
I'll weave a couple of things together and not belabor, because everyone has questions about a lot of different things. But as host of the Good Morning Show, we dedicated a portion of our time to our criminologists, Dr. Sharp, Dr. Penny, Dr. Singh. And every month we dedicated a portion of it to you and your team to come on and talk about what you guys were doing, and we always appreciate that. But in some of those conversations with our criminologists, I've learned some things, and I've talked to Dr. Penny and Dr. Sharp specifically. Dr. Wiesberg, who's one of the foremost authorities of criminologists in the country, about the law of crime concentration. Whereas we can talk about manpower, and every district wants the same manpower, they want to see police. But when you talk about the law of crime concentration, some of those theories that Gladwell and others have studied says that when you focus on crime concentration, and we've gone over those reports where you have the green, purple, yellow dots, and every year for the last several years, you can see those same dots in parts of New Orleans East, parts of the lower nine, and parts of Gentilly. And the theory is that when you focus your manpower in the law of crime concentration, you actually stop it from dispersing to parts of the other city where that cancer begins to persist and emanates out from that concentrated area. How do we begin to use policing like that, especially when the data and the science says it works? If you attack this area where people are most afraid, where there's most crime, it actually prevents crime other places. Are we looking at models like that? Or are we looking at systems like that as you implement your new plan?
So we do that anyway. We have geographical deployment, and through the plan of geographical deployment, an officer, he or she on patrol is assigned to a certain area every day, so that it can establish, so that they can establish a relationship with that community can establish a relationship with them. But even with that being said, Chief Goodley, as well as going back to Deputy Chief, now Director Thomas, was intentional when we have classes that are graduating from the academy. We're intentional in our placement of our officers, and some specifically in the 7th district, recognizing how large that landmass is, or how large of a district that is. So we're paying attention to that on a daily basis.
Lastly, the Time Sick Union report, response times continue to lag as New Orleans East and parts of New Orleans East are inundated with crime. You know, in talking to law enforcement privately sometime, or people who monitor law enforcement, given the landmass in that district, and it actually covered the entire city, we're saying that we respond to that, but there are cases sometime where we've said we've had 2 or 3 cars to patrol an entire district. So how is that possible if we have crime concentration, but we only have 2 or 3 cars allegedly patrolling an entire district?
Right, and I appreciate you saying that word allegedly, because I mean, maybe at times if an officer called in sick, you may have that, or officers call in sick, but I can assure you that it is never scheduled intentionally with 2 or 3 officers are patrolling the 7th district. So again, we still focus on trying to ensure that we have as much resources as possible in these districts. But I think what is unique to New Orleans East also is that the population has increased substantially over the last couple of years. So we're trying to do our due diligence in supplying the adequate resources to respond to their needs or be in front of their needs. So again, that's a daily challenge, and we just try to address it every day.
And lastly, thank you, but how soon can we see some of the data from our crime consultant, Metropolitan Crime Commission, even some of your own data? How soon can we see New Orleans East not have half of the murders and half of the violent crime, and some of the crime clusters with your plan? Once your plan is instituted, how soon do you think it'll be before we see those statistics and those crime categories begin to go down?
I hope to see it sooner rather than later. But I would say also we have to understand also there's a certain mentality that we're facing, we're dealing with out there as well. So even with the placement of officers, that may or may not deter it, but we're hoping that through our plan we will be able to do just that. We've already had some conversations with Captain Stamp to see what we can do differently out there, and I hope that you will start seeing that sooner rather than later.
Thank you. I won't continue to belabor this. Thank you, and I'll talk again in private. And we're going to address all those issues. The Criminal Justice Committee, as long as I'm chair, is not only going to deal with law enforcement, but we're going to deal with mentoring, conflict resolution, and all those organizations that are dealing with at-risk youth. They're going to be woven into what I think we need to do as a holistic approach to fighting crime. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Councilmember Thomas. Members and Chief, we are having some tech issues. We could hear very well what was being discussed, but we're having some audio breakup issues. Wait, it looks like it may have just gotten a little bit better. Councilmember Green, why don't we go ahead and take you? If you start breaking up, I may have to ask everyone to log back on.
Okay, I hope that you can hear me okay. I'm going to sit back a little bit from the computer because it was suggested to me that sitting too close may create some of these audio problems. But Chief, once again, I want to thank you for your presentation, and I'd like you to pass on to as many officers as you can my and many members of the community that I represent appreciation for the work that you do. On Nextdoor, you can see a lot of comments from people, and certainly there are always people who say they didn't show up, et cetera, et cetera. And I take some of those with a grain of salt. But I also see on Nextdoor people who report that they hear gunshots and they call the police, and the police actually show, even if they don't know exactly where the gunshots are, and they patrol in the area, they just drive, they send a message to whoever might have done the gunshots. If they're looking out of their windows, which they likely are because they did so for attention, they see an officer respond, and I appreciate it. I also appreciate during this campaign and before, I've had interactions with the police, and my interactions have been favorable in terms of the carjacking that I experienced, but also right in front of my house, there was an incident where someone who had stolen a car and was at the corner of Elysian Fields and Gentilly came down St. Roch Avenue and turned right in front of my house and blew out the tires on their car, on the car that was stolen, and jumped across the neighbor's fence to get away. And a police officer was there within 2 minutes of being called by the neighbor. And I know that sometimes that's because they're in the area. I don't think there's any enhanced patrolling of the area in which I live for any reason. I think that it's just important to say that there have been many responses, many favorable responses for the police. So I just wanted to say that and tell you that I hear you loud and clear relative to support for the police department. Derek Chauvin is not going to determine how officers throughout the country are viewed. There are good officers and there are sometimes officers who are bad eggs. But at the end of the day, we all need to be able to call on trained officers to work with us when there are concerns that affect us personally from a criminal standpoint and that affect our community. So that was just an introduction, and I do have a couple of questions. You actually answered a few questions in your presentation that I appreciated, but I have just a couple of questions. One, can you talk to us about what can be done to better integrate mental health related responses, if you will, when it's necessary, when you get calls along those lines? And you hear me trying to hesitate as to use the right words, but there's been suggestions and even by officers that there should be a greater integration into responses of those who are familiar with mental health crises. Can you respond to that, please? And what can we do as a council to help?
Thank you. Thank you for that. I think the biggest thing is supporting the efforts that we are putting into place right now. Who's the director over health department for the city of New Orleans, and I, as well as Director Morris of communications, as well as EMS, we've all worked together. Our teams have worked together to try to put just that type of response together where you actually have the experts responding to these calls. And we have ran a pilot program in the 3rd district, which is the area in which you are over, sir. And we're expanding that somewhat, and we've gotten some data, and I believe Dr. Vecna was able to obtain some funding to build out on that so that it would be more of a subject matter expert response as opposed to a law enforcement response to mental crises incidents. But we will still be in the area in the event that it escalates to something volatile. But we are in partnership with the health department, and we all firmly believe that is the proper response. And I think that is the best practices that you're seeing across the country as well. Weeding law enforcement out of that response and having more of a subject matter expert response to these types of calls. Uh-oh. We there?
Councilmember Greeny, you're muted.
Councilmember Green, you're muted.
There you go, Councilmember Green.
Can I be heard?
Yes,
We
sir.
can hear you now,
Okay.
yes.
I'll just go back and say, I don't know what happened. As you can see, I'm just sitting here. I didn't press anything. But the reality is I know that there's some technological glitches that need to be addressed, and they will be. But at the end of the day, Chief, please let us know how we can help. Can you talk to us for a second? Because a lot of people who have been victimized by crime are not familiar with the fact there are social workers in each of the districts, if that is in fact the case, some of which I say it's based on what I'm told and what I've been able to glean from a couple of phone calls. Are there social workers in every district, and someone who's been victimized by a crime, how can they receive assistance through the police department?
Yes, thank you for that question, Councilman. So we do have a victim witness program, and it's not, and it's called that, but it's not at the level in which you look at a state or federal level victim witness program where victims and or witnesses are being relocated. But it is just a division or a unit that is able to provide resources to support our victims and or witnesses as well possible. Every district has a counselor. In some district, it may be a shared counselor or social worker, I would say, to assist with just that, providing as much assistance as we can, or even connecting them with the right resources to help this family to identify any underlying causes that have put them in this position, so that we hopefully would not have to do this again. And I can tell you, in almost all of our domestic violence cases, we are receiving callbacks from our social workers to ensure that we are doing our due diligence to support them. But there are, to answer your question, yes, social workers in every district, and you can contact your local district captain, district commanding officer to get into contact with that social worker.
Chief, I think that you're going to get more calls with regards to victims who want to receive that assistance. It's so important. And there are members of our community who are really being activated by wanting to assist victims. For example, there's been a new organization formed, Voices of the Victims of Crime, and they're going to want to work with the police department to do whatever they can to assist victims. I know that there's money sometimes available for expenses associated with funerals. You hate to think about that and the like. But Chief, whatever we can do as a council to assist in helping, because that office is going to get a lot more calls, I need you to let us know. All right.
Yes, sir. I just want to make sure we're clear on this too. This is not anything that we're necessarily providing any financial assistance, but we are connecting them to resources. And if there's some sort of counseling resources that we could provide, we're doing just that. But from a financial perspective, we don't necessarily have those resources. But if there are partners in which we could partner up with to point them in the right direction, we do that.
Okay. I'm kind of getting a bit of misinformation on that, and I'll make sure that I ask a little bit more about that. I was told something a little bit different, especially in terms of expenses for those who are bereaved. But also, retention is a big issue. I know that recruitment is a challenge in itself. What can we as a council do to help to get the word out? And I'm going to be getting the word out about, the favorability of being in law enforcement and the like, and supporting the officers who put their lives on the line every day, every time they make a call. But if you were giving a general message to us or to me, what can the council do to assist in retention? Seems like an obvious question, but please feel free to speak specifically as to what you would like to see us do.
Again, I think it goes back to that ask at the conclusion of our my presentation. That is supporting the officers. Hold us accountable when we're wrong. Hold us accountable when we're right. But the biggest thing is bringing them out and letting them know that you support them. And we have not seen that publicly for quite some time, for one reason or another. And we're just asking for that support. That definitely helps with retention. We are looking at other ways in which we can work differently with our officers that we do have. I think someone brought up something about take-home cards. There are some officers who do have take-home cards, but that comes with the idea that you're also living within Orleans Parish. I think it should be beneficial to our community if you have a take-home card, where those police cards can be seen in the city of New Orleans within their own community. And that gives them some sort of sense of security, knowing that officer is right there in their block with their police car. So it is little things like that, subtle things like that, I think, can help us with retention. And we are working towards just that through pay incentives, through career paths forward within the department as well.
Chief, can you talk to me about gun buyback? So that was a good idea. Do they work well? Should we be doing more in the city of New Orleans?
I think we could always do more when we're talking about retrieving or taking weapons in or taking weapons off the street. We have worked in partnership with our criminal justice commissioner Stevens, as well as I remember we had one about a year or two ago at New Hope, Pastor Weathersby, which we had a very successful gun buyback program. I'm not familiar with, I can't remember where the funding came from with that, but I do recall there it was a very successful initiative until the point we actually ran out of money. We had to.
Okay, Chief, our connection is going out. I appreciate the fact that you've met with me before, and I'm going to share any information that I can with the public. I do want to bring up one thing, and you brought it up, and it was related to an incident that I experienced. Maybe it's just a legend and it's not correct, but I mean, a lot of people say that the police are hampered in their ability to pursue criminals who have left the scene of a crime. And if it's a sensitive issue, because I don't want the public to think that there are no instances in which the police will pursue someone who has perpetrated a crime. Using the correct words, I know that you will. Can you tell me what the pursuit policy is?
So
and if it's something that we need to discuss offline.
I mean, we could discuss further offline, but what I can say, we do pursue for violent crimes. I mean, homicides, shootings, carjackings. We will pursue individuals for those violent offenses. There's some we have to take into consideration. I mean, the shoplifting, are we going to do a vehicle pursuit? I think the risk is not worth the reward. So we have to think about those major felonies in which we are actually pursuing offenses for.
A carjacking is considered a violent offense.
Yes, sir. That's what I want to talk to you more about. Your experience and get clarity as to what actually occurred with you and your experience, so that you can have a better appreciation, or more or less a better understanding of what we can and cannot do. Because I really would like to get into the weeds of what happened with you.
I'd like to talk to you today, but I was under the impression that there was an immediate turnaround, even with the vehicle, even with my vehicle still in view of the officer turned around. I thought that was part of a policy related to the consent decree, and I've kind of been sharing information incorrectly as to why I was so calm about the fact that I could see my vehicle going down the street, but the officer couldn't pursue. But I'd like to talk to you about that. The last thing that I'd like to ask, amongst the things that I've had a chance to meet with you on, and I appreciate it, and we're going to move forward working closely together, because again, this is the most important issue to affect our citizens at this time. What is the optimum level of officers that will allow you to do what you feel that you need to do in our city of New Orleans right now?
I mean, when
of course, how can we get there? We have to do it. What is that number?
I mean, I welcome all resources. When I joined the department, we were about 1,700 strong. Of course, over the years, we had 3 years of a hiring freeze that really had put us in a position where we have not ever been able to recover or overcome or get to those numbers ever again. If I feel the perfect world, I'll say 1,500 officers would do just great for what we would like to accomplish and what we would want to do. Better staffing in my detective bureaus, better staffing in my field bureaus, where we have a better response with calls for services.
Thank you. I appreciate the number. It just kind of gives a point of reference for everyone. We're going to certainly all work to get there. I hear too often that the officers can't do the type of patrols that have been done in the past, because of course they're going from call to call because of the limited number of officers and have to spend a lot of time on paperwork and the like. And I know that there's an increase that is required, but it's good to have an idea, just it gives us something else to work to. I'm going to do everything that I can to encourage folks to look at law enforcement as a career. I'm going to talk to high school students and to college students. My district includes 3 universities and 5 high schools, potential sources of recruiting persons to law enforcement. I'm going to talk positively about a career in law enforcement. I'm just asking you, Chief, and the captains and everyone associated with the department to know, as I told you when we met before, that I'm committed to this. I want to see a safer city. And I've seen over the past many years, many decades, not enough action taken that's going to help to make our city safer. And I'm so pleased to be on this city council at this time that is taking on this issue. I have private discussions with members of our city council who have been elected by citizens who are so very concerned about this issue because they want our city to be safer. And I'm looking forward to working with you, Chief, a lot more. And thank you for your answers to those questions. I'll have more, as we progress and as we continue working. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Green. And just want to say, encourage everyone too. We do have an alternative police reporting division. Do encourage as a burden reduction that if you can take the report online or do the report online, so that will allow officers to do and focus, do the patrol that you're asking of and focus on some of the violent crimes. And with recruitment efforts, we do have a new commanding officer over the recruitment division, Lieutenant Merrill Merritt. And I think you're going to see a lot of things happening as he works with Captain Chief Dupree to try to improve and ramp up our recruitment efforts. Of course, the disconnect is those ages between 18 and 20 or 20 and a half years of age, where we have to try to keep them focused so that they can on board to become New Orleans police officers at the age of 21.
Thank you, Chief. All right, everyone, I'm going to ask that the tech problems are getting worse. And so I'm going to ask that we log off and then log right back. Paul, does that work?
Yes, I'm gonna shut down the Zoom and restart it. So if everyone can hop back on in about 2 minutes, that should clear up most of the freezing issues.
Okay, thank you. See you in just 1 sec.